Now, I want to have some fun conversation or fun fact about this video because I found out something kind of funny, interesting that I decided to make a video specifically from a channel from X/Twitter called Cartoon on the Moon. And this channel usually is sort of a news scooper for cartoon news, information, or anime, or anything about animation. And once in a while, they click something just so interesting that I kind of want to talk about. And today, I want to talk about what happened of the original design of Finnick's van from Zootopia, changing to Aztec to Conan barbarian sort of style of the van. Of course, if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's a scene when actually Felix actually left and used his van and drives away. You only see the van a couple of times in the movie, but it's sort of a drawing stuck in a wall. It's sort of a very famous sort of photo. If you are Latino, you've seen this image before. It's a very famous painting about an Aztec holding a woman atop of the mountain, but decided to change it for some apparent reason that honestly nobody knows why they changed this style. But more ironically is the fact you finding out depends where you live. This style still's there. If you see the American version, they completely removed it. Even that you could rewatch that in the trailer of the original Zootopia, the art style is still there, but yet nobody knows why they do this, but yet it's just sort of kind of fascinating to talk about in sort of the conversation coming out of this. Now, before I continue on, my name is Rachel. I like to talk about animation, not just animation, through reviews, first impressions, cartoon theories, or sometimes, if I have some spare time, cartoon breaking news. Of course, you like how it's going and like to help my channel, put a like, comment, and subscribe. That's the only thing you need to do. If not, that's fine. If you do, thank you. Because of you, I'm getting close to my main goal of 2,000 subscribers. And yes, I'm getting close every single day because of people like you. People who like, comment, and share. Now, let's break down this sort of fun fact type of video. Now, let's get started. Now, being known, this is not the first time that Walt Disney, Pixar, or any other animated studio does this, because every time they do an animated film, they do sort of changes to the last second, depends on sort of the country you actually live. I think one of the big example is sort of Zootopia. News reporters that depends what country you live, the animal change who reporting of the news that be sort of their well-known animal who actually exists of that sort of country. For example, if you live in Canada, it's a moose. You live in China, it's actually a panda, and etc. So you're kind of wondering, they did the same thing to the Bessie Van Felix, that sort of Aztec princess warrior design of his van. In a way, I don't think so. In fact, a lot of people sort of speculate down below, thinking maybe they remove it because they think it's sort of appropriation for a drawing that did not belong to them. That could be the move they did so not defend any Latinos watching the movie. Even that, this not really offending anyone if they decide to go that direction, because this famous drawing is actually a story about the two mountains next to Mexico who actually have a love story. Now, I'm gonna breaking down, but be warned, there are different variants of this story. I'm about to sort of break it down, the sort of kind of like the short story or the highlights of the story, because there are so different versions of it. Now, the two characters of this love story called Poco Potato and Testiwado, I know I messed that up, so this is sort of where the names, you want to make it clear how to say it. They're basically two lovers, one Aztec warrior and another one just a sort of normal civilian. But both couple fell in love and want to get married. But the only problem is the father of the woman doesn't like the Aztec warrior, and he's trying to get rid of him wherever he can. So he decided sort of a plan, because he knows the Aztec warrior want to marry her daughter. So when it's time to ask him for her marriage, the guy responded saying, okay, I do not like you, but I will not interfere of your sort of relationship for only one condition. If you go to war, the next couple of towns, there's been a sort of a war about different tribes. If you go to the war, finish that war, and come back alive, I'd like you sort of to get married with my own daughter. And the Aztec agreed. He left, turns around, tells his daughter, saying, yeah, your boyfriend died in the war. So, yeah, I think you have to move along in your life. You chose a completely different suitor for your life. Because of this, the young woman became ill because the truth about what happened to his bestie boyfriend, and she sort of died because of the shock. But sort of depends one version you hear. Some people say a couple days, a couple weeks, or maybe a month, depends what version you hear. But during this time, the boyfriend comes back from war, talk to the dad saying, look, you told me what to do, I accomplished this, now let me marry your daughter. But the father responded, I'm sorry, it's too late, she passed away. Now, this is the point of the what version you hear. One version is basically the boyfriend just takes the dead body and goes to the mountain, or he asks permission. But either way, it's all in the same. The boyfriend takes the body and goes to the mountains to sort of bury her the best respectful way he can. But the only problem is he sort of died going up the mountain. But depends which versions. The way he's trying to bury her, the snow kicked in and buried the boyfriend next to the girlfriend. Or other versions, the gods were sort of surprised how much love the guy has of the woman. They couldn't make them as mountains. Or other versions, they have multiple mountains of them. That's sort of how it sort of end up of the story of the two famous mountains of Mexico. That's why they sort of connected this sort of drawing. And you can see why maybe Disney had cold shoulders leaving this sort of drawing on the van, because it's a very Latino-ish type of story, but yet it's just a sort of a love story. In fact, if you go to Pacific, Mexico City, they do have, if I remember right, statue of the both lovers to represent the story of the mountain words. So you can see why maybe we're sort of hesitating to keep the drawing. But the only problem is there down below on the comments do point out they watched the movie where they're from and they still see the original drawing of the two Aztec warriors there in the van. But you go to the American films to watch their version, they have the sort of Conan the Barbarian sort of style. But it's sort of weird why they did it. But to me, it sort of makes sense if they did stick to painting because of the story. Because it's just a story, nothing really that meaningful when you say for the love story. That also depends which version you hear. But it sort of makes sense because it's Mexico or specifically Latin America, but this story is from Mexico. It sort of makes sense because Mexico is sort of kind of strange. And I do not mean sort of a weird country. I mean, if you live or talk to people in Mexico or the whole country, weird things always happen. In fact, they even have a phrase. They call it sort of Mexicanisms. Not the same way how they're translated, but you get the idea. It's sort of a thing. It just sort of happens. In fact, you could go on TikTok or YouTube and look up to weird things happening to Mexico. They have like dozens of different videos. People trying to like walk away or run off a sort of side way, and something weird always happens. In other words, it sort of just makes sense because that's sort of the vibe of Mexican people in the Mexican country. Because if somehow they decide to bring people in Zootopia, but make it in Mexico, that drawing itself just makes more sense. Because if they do, they can easily put online like, oh my god, talking animals. And someone probably responded, what you expect is Mexico. Is something should happen because of how weird this country really is. That should be more common sense now. But other than that, a lot of people are not really upset. It's just sort of kind of weird. Like, let's face it, there is no reason, only if they're sort of scared. But at the same time, I feel they can also add some backstory to specifically to Nick and Judy. You could say sort of a kind of like a omen or a sort of Chekhov's gun sort of situation, mirroring of the art comparing to Nick and Judy's sort of love story. One would get injured and the other one gets saved. In fact, it just adds to their sort of relationship if they use sort of common sense or figure out what this sort of painting really means, so it could elevate Julie and Nick's sort of story, specifically their love story, because it's sort of obvious it actually does work if you've seen the original movie. Because if they're at least move them then and put Nick and Julie side to side of the drawing and sort of foreshadow one of them actually get pew pew with a weapon, sort of complement their love story or their buddy relationship cop sort of story now it works. Because let's face it, it just sort of makes sense, especially the sequel, or at least the trailer, because the movie not yet come out yet, sort of giving that sort of hint both of them will fall in love, but sort of kind of tragedy in the mix. But yet, because of the Disney movie, they will make it out. But yet, it just sort of makes sense to not to remove it. But at least that is my opinion. But I don't know you, how do you feel if they choose to not or choose to remove this sort of painting? You think this is appropriate or not? Tell me down below on your own opinion. Now I got nothing else to say, just thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and have a wonderful day. Bye.